I call the meeting to order. City of University Heights City Council special meeting. Tonight is Tuesday, June 27th, 2023, and the meeting is being conducted electronically tonight. All 5 members of council are here. And first order of business is consideration of resolution 2320. And Ryan Foley, you get to speak, our city engineer. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, we have, as we've been talking about the last couple of meetings, we have a project proposed on Monroe Street, generally from 216 Monroe Street down the hill to 416 Monroe Street. It includes installation of new storm pipe and subdrain pipe, and then reconstruction of some concrete street panels that are damaged currently. So we received 6 bids on Thursday, June 22nd, and our low bid was from Veith Construction, and it was actually 3 of the 6 bids were within 5% of our engineer's estimate, which is really good to see. But the low bid was just above what we had estimated at $155,640.50. So we are recommending award of that contract to Veith Construction. So that's before the council tonight is resolution. Let me find the number one more time, 2320, to accept the bid and award the construction contract to Veith Construction for the Monroe Street 2023 Monroe Street improvements.
First, I'd like to get a motion and second on the table. Is there a motion?
I'll motion.
Motion by Bobby Scott. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Stephanie. Discussion. Okay, hearing none, roll call vote.
Gahn,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Swales.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Now we'll have a discussion of existing off-street parking at hotel. And as Mike spoke about it, we'll have Steve go first and then followed by the developer, and then the public can speak at this item, and then followed by that, the council. So Steve, do you want to start off with the existing off-street parking?
You bet, I'm happy to. So when the hotel was developed from a single family residence to the hotel, a new zone was created in the zoning ordinance called the CH commercial hotel zone. And that zoning ordinance was amended to provide for development pursuant to what's called a planned unit development and a planned unit development agreement, which is a zoning tool that gives the council and a developer flexibility to zone particular to a location, in this case, the 901 Melrose, which is where the hotel is situated. The zoning changes specified that the changes in that particular zone, section 14B of the or 14A, I'm sorry, of the zoning ordinance would supersede other portions of the zoning ordinance related to parking and height restrictions, setbacks, and those kinds of things. As a part of that process, then the hotel in the city in 2017 entered into a PUD development agreement that specified a certain number of parking spaces, a maximum number of parking spaces off street, and that number was 156. That was in 2017, and in 2018, the hotel developers came back to the council and said that they would like to incorporate a rooftop restaurant on the 6th floor, which wasn't part of the plan in 2017. And as a consequence, among other requested changes, they asked for additional parking spaces And the city approved that and amended the development agreement to provide for 196 parking spaces. And that's the current maximum number. So as it stands, the current maximum number of off-street parking spaces at the hotel is 196. And the hotel developers have asked to increase that number. To increase that number would require the council to amend the zoning ordinance because the maximum number is specified there, and also to then amend the PUD development agreement if the council desired to do that. Amending the zoning ordinance requires a notice and a public hearing. Notice gets published in the newspaper. It gets sent to property owners within a certain distance, 200 feet of the hotel. Public hearing is held, and then the council would have to approve 3 readings of an amended zoning ordinance or an amendment to the zoning ordinance, unless, of course, the council elected to collapse 2 or 3 of those readings into, 1 or 2 readings, I guess you could say. And then the PUD development agreement, to amend that would require just an agenda item and a vote one time on a resolution for such amendment. So in addition to the maximum number of parking spaces, the PUD development agreement, as it was as it was executed or agreed to back in 2017, and this was not changed in 2018, it provided that the only use for the hotel parking could be for hotel guests, staff, service providers. At the time they were actually at the hotel. It specifically said that that sort of tailgate parking and just selling spaces on game days was prohibited. And the hotel owners have asked the city council to reconsider that provision to permit daily parking, hospital workers and that sort of thing, as well as game day parking. And in those parking changes, if the council were inclined to allow them or to make them, would be changes to the PUD development agreement. And as I said a minute ago, that would require an agenda item and an adoption or vote on a resolution just one time. So that's the proposals as I understand them, and the process that would be required should the council decide to move forward in that direction. I should say one other thing. With respect to the zoning change, the council's the zoning ordinance permits the council to refer a requested change to the zoning ordinance to the zoning commission. The council doesn't have to do that, but the council may do that to solicit additional public input and to make a recommendation to the council with regard to the requested change. And again, the zoning change that would be required with respect to the requested changes here would be to increase the number of allowable or permitted parking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now we'll go to the developer. I see it's only Greg is here tonight. So Greg.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, I mean, Steve kind of said it all perfect. Just looking to increase my parking, and I don't want to break any rules. So I was going to ask on the PUD to change or not change, to omit the 3A. And so the restrictions that are on us at the hotel is it's a hindrance to our business in the sense of creating more revenue for the hotel and to pay bills and such. So we would ask the city council to omit the PUD 3A if possible. It's what Steve was saying on the the parking and its restrictions on parking. It's on the PUD. And then along with that, increase the 196 to a number which the city council can agree on. We're hoping somewhere between 250 and 300 to increase the number from 196 to 250 or 300. You know, I would recommend 300. And then because on football Saturdays, to try to maximize my parking on football Saturdays, if I get to park on the, say, the grassy area up on where 909 used to be, that's going to push me over my allotted 196 amount if I get to park up there. So I guess I guess my ask on those two items, I guess, is on to amend the ordinance and to omit the 3A on the PUD. So.
Okay, who would like to speak from the public? You can raise your hand or take yourself out. Okay, Pat Bauer. Hi, Pat. You're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Pat.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to thank University Heights for the transparency they've shown in their digital materials. It enabled me to prepare the memo that shows up as an attachment to tonight's agenda with links to extensive materials available in the form of agendas and attachment and minutes and recordings. I also understand from Steve that you're soon will be transitioning to in-person meetings, which I think is a very, very valuable thing. I assume that these Zoom meetings have been fine for non-controversial matters in the past, but I think with matters of this sort, I don't know that there's any substitution for kind of in-person things where people can look in the eye and hear the considerations of residents. As I mentioned in my memo, you know, because we don't have an extensive city staff, opposing views, if they're going to be heard at all, have to be brought forth by either counselors or concerned residents. And certainly my memo is that, right? It attempts to develop the negatives because the applicants don't tell you the negatives. They just tell you the positives. The other thing I wanted to mention is that to the extent that there's an intemperate tone to the public input that you received, is because this is coming from people who were there 6 years ago when this went down and a deal was cut. There was exchanges, as Steve has mentioned, PUD agreement is a contract. And when you negotiate a contract, people give up some things and the other side gives up other things. The developers had no right to change a residential lot to a hotel. And in return, they agreed that the city could impose regulations in the PUD. And those are the regulations that they're attempting to slough off now that they've got a hotel up and running. People have mentioned bait and switch. You know, I don't know if that's the right word, but there's like a new normal, right? Oh, this is just a vacant, you know, burnt out grass lot. Well, you know, 6 years ago, that was important green space developing the Melrose corridor. And if it's burnt out grass now, it's because the developers haven't done anything with it. So to come in now, as I say, my memo addresses, and I encourage interested citizens to take a look at it. I address the merits of each proposal, and I frankly find them wanting. I don't think they've met their burden of persuasion on these changes. But to try to explain the tenor of the responses you've heard at the last meeting and this one, is that a deal is a deal. Contracts are supposed to have consequences. And they agreed to things in 2017, and they were desperate to get the approval for the rezoning through. And they gave 3 houses, 2 houses, and parks and all kinds of things to get those changes. And now they come back and they want to back up. Now I have a colleague, Steve Burton, who's written a book on good faith and contracts. And he points out that the essence of bad faith in contracts is attempting to recapture foregone opportunities. That when you give things up in order to get a deal, then when you turn around and try to get those things back, that's bad faith. And I think that that's what you're hearing from residents, is a sense that what's gone down here is contractual bad faith. So as I say, the merits, you got to get into the weeds. I've tried to do that in my memo. But the overarching thing here is a deal is a deal. And what they do is they come back 6 years later with a different cast of characters who may not be aware. Now, in my memo, I point out the traffic and parking things, but there were a lot of other things that the speakers at the last meeting mentioned, having to do with the green space and the Melrose corridor. And I was just amazed to hear Greg Stillner come in and talk about 250 to 300 spaces. That's incredible. You know, it was the game day parking was a big concern, and it was a major concern to the votes you needed to get this through in 2017. You know, Dottie Maher and Sylvia Caseta had some very insistent things about protections for the residents, including the gifting of $600,000 worth of houses to the people who are now going to be adversely affected by this change. And for this council to just slough off those negotiations and those trade-offs, those exchanges, and say, oh, you know, new deal, we'll just assume that the present is like, no, that's not, that is totally inconsistent with a deal's a deal. And I encourage the council as strongly as I can to reject that effort to double back and double dip and bait and switch. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Who'd like to speak next?
I could just say
Jerry?
something briefly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Jerry, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Jerry Zimmerman, 1434 Grand Avenue. Was a counselor, was a temporary mayor. I yielded to Louise because one has to, you know. I think Pat, as usual, is very coherent. I don't profess to be that coherent, but if this is a financial problem that they're having with the Marriott that they have, the least we would want to see, even to consider this proposal, is the financial distress they are experiencing. And if we thought it was important to save the courtyard, then the council could make that decision. That's the situation. They just want to maximize profit. And that's what businesses do. Pat stated it beautifully. This is closing in on bad faith where they're baiting and switching. And it might have been expected, but I didn't expect it so soon. Next, we might hear that they're not renting enough rooms. They may want to make a brothel out of the courtyard or something, you know? I mean, to increase revenues. The council should just not even bother with this proposal because it is so contrary to very extensive negotiations when they started this. And I would propose that the council just not spend our time thinking about this.
Thank you, Jerry. Who'd like to speak next? Do I see anybody? Yes, Warren Tunwell.
Hi, yeah, Warren Tunwell, 100 Kozer Avenue. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Warren.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll just come out. I'm against the proposal. I think since there's an agreement in place that was apparently discussed at length 6 years ago, that it needs to be honored and stay in place. I think it's disrespectful to any of the neighbors adjacent to that area to remove that green space. I don't know why, if they're already selling spaces to the public, why in the world this would even be considered. If they need parking for guests, then it sounds like they've got parking that they've elected to sell, that they need to go back and re-examine that. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Warren.
Thanks.
Well, who would else? Okay, Mary Panther. Mary, you're still on mute.
Sorry, Mary Panther, 40 Kozer. I would just say that I agree wholeheartedly with Warren, Pat, and Jerry. I think it's really disrespectful to the people that live over there.
Thank you, Mary.
Yep.
Who else would like to speak?
I can.
Okay, Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm Stephanie Walk. I live at 35 Olive Court, so I live right across the street from the hotel. And I again echo what everybody else is saying, that I am in opposition of this. I know plenty of people who, I work at the university. All of my friends work at the university. If this is wanting to be university parking, I think this is more just selfish on the Marriott's part, in that they are just trying to make more money off of this. The same with tailgating. I have plenty of friends who tailgate in the parking lot, and the amount of money that they are spending to stay in the hotel on game day and pay for a parking space for tailgating on game day is just astronomical. And so I can't even begin to fathom that this is the money is needed in order to be a successful business. I think this is more just selfishness on their point and trying to just make more money and benefit.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Okay, Michael.
Mike Ritchie, 20 Olive Court.
Oh,
Thing I'd like to say about the hotel is that the hotel has been very good neighbors to everybody around there. They have a great operation and to keep things clean. They've been good partners with the city that lets the city hold several meetings there for free. They've assisted in making improvements to the Triangle Park, installed a free little library, helped the city remove the heavy antique streetlights from the Swisher track and store them at their own personal property. They've also let the city use space at the hotel for farmers market for 2 years. Now, according to this 3A agreement, wouldn't this farmers market be illegal to do because it had nothing to do with the hotel? But yet when it benefits the city, we'll violate this agreement. So the other thing of it is that as far as being able to do the football parking, I don't see that being unreasonable. The one thing that I see on the football parking is that how are you going to keep people just from the large amount of people down there? What are you going to do to keep them out of that spot unless you fence the thing completely off on game day? But I think that the developers of this hotel have done a good job on building relationships with the city. And I think that the city needs to take in consideration and try to work with them. Thank you.
okay. Thank you, Mike. And then we'll have Michael Crocker.
Thank you, Louise. I will echo Pat and pretty much everyone else's commentary that all of this was debated at great length and decided when we were developing the PUD agreement, the development agreement, which I believe is a legally binding contract, if I'm understanding correctly. The current uses, it's explicitly forbidden to be using game day parking there. So that's going on currently. I don't see any benefit to the city of allowing this change. And again, a deal is a deal. This was done a long time ago. And I know the councilors and the mayor, you guys put a lot of time into a lot of these things. This is an easy no, right? There is no need for a long discussion about something that was discussed many, many times over back in 2017, 2018. So I'm very much against a bait and switch. It's not in good faith. Quite frankly, there's a question of integrity when you make a deal and then you come back as soon as possible to try and change that deal and quite openly and honestly just for your own profits. I don't see any benefit at all for the city for even considering this. If we're going to have a long discussion for another night, maybe it should be about enforcing the current development agreement and stopping the activities that are going on now. Obviously, there's game day parking going on. The developers have removed a section of curbing to enable them to drive cars up onto that green space. And it's a green space that I believe, and this part I would need to go verify, I believe is supposed to include more trees. And I believe those trees were removed by the developer in the original development. So it's not, it was never intended to be bearing green grass anyway. But it sure as hell wasn't intended to be a parking lot.
Thank you, Michael. Mary, you wanted to speak?
I just had a question. I just wanted to clarify with the previous speaker, Mike Ritchie. Do you live on Olive Court or do you own property there?
I own property there.
Okay, you don't live in the neighborhood. Is that
No,
correct?
but I'm over there. You know, that's the one thing that kind of riles me, Mary, is that I take pretty much pride in my property. I'm over there. I'm pretty much every day maintaining it. I've helped out over there in the neighborhood. I've mowed Triangle Park to help the town out. I've helped neighbors that are permanent residents over there with mowing and snow removal and things like that. So don't tell me that I don't have a dog in the fight.
I'm not saying you don't have a dog in the fire.
And the other thing of it is, Mary, I've never heard one of my tenants or anybody complain anything about hotel issues, noise, crowds, or anything. I've never heard about permanent neighbors. Now, one of the neighbors there is one of the people that bought one of those houses that was donated to the city. I've got a good relationship with him. I've never heard him complain one thing about the hotel.
Sir, I'm not arguing with your anything that you're saying. I was just wanting to clarify whether you lived in the neighborhood or not. So thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Pat Bauer.
Yeah, just
Pat Bauer's got his hand up.
for clarification of the record, I've heard that they've been renting out parking spaces and they've been putting up temporary signage, both of which are prohibited by the PUD agreement. Is that so? Maybe you could ask Greg.
Okay, we'll keep going through public.
Okay, I don't know that that's the case, but I think that needs to be determined. If they have not been honoring the existing limitations on their use, I think it calls into question their ability to comply to any requirements you may impose this time around.
Okay, when we get to council, we'll check on that. Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak during this time? Michael
Jonathan.
Crocker. I'm sorry, Michael Crocker had his hand up, so I was going to let him speak. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Sure,
Mike.
we'll take but 1 second to answer Pat, in terms of what are they currently using it for, I can tell you a section of curbing has been removed to enable cars to drive up onto and off of that green space. I can tell you that there is currently signage in the basement of the hotel advertising parking for $75 a spot. That is, football game day parking signage being stored in the basement, and it's taking up existing parking spaces in the basement of the hotel currently. I can send you the photographs if you would like to see all of this. That's all.
Thank you, Michael. And then we had Jonathan. Was that Jonathan Wilson?
Yeah, Jonathan Wilson, 23 Olive Court. So my wife and I are the couple who purchased that property. And as a reminder, there is a covenant on that property that states that we are not allowed to rent that property out. And we've been respecting that covenant. We have no intention of renting that property out, but that is an agreement that was made when we purchased that property. So I would not expect that we would undo that, as much as I'd love for property value to be able to do that. And so it's a similar instance where an agreement was made. We are respecting it. We're not asking for it to be overturned. With the parking situation too, there's already parking on game days, even if it wasn't allowed initially. And from a financial standpoint, I'm not sure that the number of parking spots just for general public parking or employee parking would justify having a blind spot on that corner. And there's a lot of other logistics that would have to be worked out if this was even something that we wanted to move forward with. But I am in opposition to addition of parking there because agreement was made similar to other agreements that were part of the hotel deal.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anybody else want to speak? They can take themselves off mute. I don't see anybody on camera, so it makes it a little hard. Jerry Fangman, you have
Yeah,
your,
this is Jerry Fangman. I live I live on Olive Court, and I'm just here to say that I'm opposed to a parking spot because I don't want to live on a university parking lot. And, you know, I agree with most of the other people that I'm totally opposed to turning that into parking for the university or for game day. So that's my 2 cents worth. So that's all I have to say.
thank you, Jerry. Let's see, we have any other person? We have Stan Lauberman's here, and Pat Yagi, I see. Would either of them like to speak now about this topic? Okay, I don't see them taking themselves on mute. Maybe they want to speak on a different topic. So we'll go to some council discussion. This is on the existing of street parking at the hotel.
Louise,
Yes.
this is Bobby, Scott.
Oh.
I'd love to hear if Greg wants to be able to respond to anything there. I'd love to have him. I'd love to hear his kind of response to some of those comments.
Is that okay, please?
Yes. Of course.
So at the last meeting, Lisa and Tim and some of the other city council members asked me to bring some other options for parking, and I've been working a little bit with Tim on some blueprints and such, and I was out there right after that meeting looking at other options for parking. And I planned on bringing all those ideas and options and for the grassy spot that we're talking about, I planned on bringing that to the July 11th meeting. So that it sounds like there's a lot of pushback on this parking lot, and that if city council decides not to put the parking lot in there, that's great. But I want to make sure, or I want to say that tonight's meeting is just about basically football parking and not pouring a pad and not putting a parking lot in there. It's just about football parking and daytime parking. So that's all. I'm very much hearing everybody's comments about the parking lot. I get it. They don't, no one wants it. So I understand. I will bring all the ideas though to the July 11th meeting.
So I'd like to clarify, this is Lisa, so many people on screen. Greg, that I was not asking you for more ideas about parking. I was asking you to solve the problems that you have created at the hotel, needing this additional parking by taking what we allowed as a meeting conference center and turning it into a large scale event center. So I was asking you for a different kind of solution rather than additional parking or ways of additional parking. So.
I don't think I asked Mike Haverkamp if there was any other correspondence, before we moved to council. Mike, did you have any other correspondence?
We did get one this afternoon that just got forwarded to all the council. It's from Stephen Zager, who lives in Birkdale. And since it came relatively late, do you mind? I can read it. I don't think council's seen it yet. Council members, you have had a request for additional space for parking by Marriott owners. My recommendation, I walk by this small grassy area almost every day and have looked closely at this request as it's being considered. They've already defined boundary with the white fence, and I can't envision damage of any significant measure to our neighborhood. On the contrary, I'm so grateful to the owners for risking their future with this large investment. The hospital and U of I sports have benefited tremendously. This means our community has benefited as well as these institutions. In addition, when convention events, medical and others, are sponsored at the Marriott, they bring in thousands of dollars in hotel food and other retail spending. If the hotel cannot offer adequate parking, they have no choice but to go elsewhere. As far as why did they not see this need prior to their site plan, business is a lot of unknowns and communities need to support them or they will go elsewhere. Let's not get a reputation of being an unsupportive community. Please vote in favor of their request. Respectfully, Stephen Zager, 106 Birkdale.
Thank you. That's the only additional one that you have that's not been sent.
Exactly.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I interrupted discussion, but would council like to keep going down the issues for discussion? I mean, I feel like we've talked about parking and football parking and somewhat, and then discuss at the end, next steps. Which direction do you want to go now? This change, as Steve said, would take a zoning change and a PUD change, right, Steve? To change the number. You're on mute.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So, what would council like to do? You want to keep going through and then talk at the end? Because I think things are getting crossed over. I was thinking about individually, but of course, it's all of these things that are interest to the public, all of these things. And Steve, do you want to talk about the game day football right now?
Just the process would be to amend the PUD agreement. If the council, if there's a direction to me, the process would be, I would put together an amendment to the PUD agreement. I would talk to the hotel owners, representatives on language. I would put together a resolution for the council to consider approving an amendment. I would circulate the amendment and the resolution to the council in advance of, the July meeting or the August meeting or whenever we could put it together and whenever the council wanted me to put it together. And then the council could vote on it and consider it at that meeting.
Would you go ahead and speak to the discussion of the temporary signage too?
Yes, thanks. I didn't say anything about that. So the temporary signage is the same as the use of the parking lot. In other words, game day parking. It's not in the zoning ordinance. It's in the PUD development agreement. And what the agreement says is that such signage is prohibited. And if the council desired to change that provision, then again, the council would vote on a resolution amending the PUD development agreement after proper notice and consideration at one meeting. It wouldn't require a zoning change or multiple considerations.
Okay, did you want to speak on either of those, Greg? Did you want to add anything to those? I know it's been.
Yeah, just quick on the sign. I think we talked about the other one. The signage, I'm the temporary signage is just for Easter and Mother's Day. We set the room, like a wedding. We've got a massive amount of compliments about how amazing it is. And people love it. So I just feel like it's a nice reminder to the community that we have a Mother's Day brunch and and Neeser brunch with the views that we have up there. I just think it's just, it's nice to, have it, and I think it's amazing, and I think, just a reminder to everybody that we have it, so.
Okay, we'll move on to the public. Would the public have additional comments they want to make on any of these three items?
Louise,
Oh, Pat's raising his hand.
I still haven't gotten an answer to the question about whether they've been parking and putting up temporary signs despite the prohibition of those activities in the PUD agreement. And if so, what have they been paying hotel motel tax on those revenues? Are they renting them out to construction workers during the week? Is that subject to sales tax? Is that going to be reflected in property tax valuations? You've got something on the books that apparently, at least I hear, isn't being honored. And I'd like to know if that's so and why they've chosen not to honor those requirements, those clear legal requirements.
Did you want to comment on any of that, Greg? You're on mute if you want to.
I would rather comment on that in July. I don't know what to say to that, so. I just feel like, I just feel like I'm being attacked in that situation, and it was, I don't know, I don't know what to do, actually.
Would anyone else from the public like to speak about those? Michael, you raised your hand, I see.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, it's a simple question. Have you been parking cars there on game days? It's pretty easy yes or no answer.
Would anyone else like to speak about any of these three items? Any additional comments? Stan, would you like to speak, or Pat Yagi? I see you two haven't spoke. I just thought I'd give you a platform to speak if you'd like.
Appreciate that. I'll wait until July as well.
Okay, thank you, Stan. And okay, and I don't see Pat Yagi going off mute. Okay, Pat. You're off mute now. Did you want to speak? Oh, okay, she's back on mute. Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Can I speak?
Okay. Yeah, Pat, I can hear you.
Okay, yes, I'd like to listen to some more, and I'd speak later.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Did I give everybody an opportunity to speak or speak again? If you want, Greg, are you raising your hand?
Yeah. On the one other item that I wanted to talk about was the conditional zoning agreement on football parking. Steve, it says in there that I can't park on 905 as well in the grass on football Saturdays. That was one of the items I wanted to see if the city council would reconsider on the house that I own there on 905, if they would allow me to park on the grass on football Saturdays on there. On that, I think it's page 6 on the CZA, the conditional zoning agreement. I know that most of the city parks on their lawn, so thought maybe they would let me.
Steve, did you want to comment on that?
I'm not in a position to. I'll have to look into that. If that at a minimum, that would take a change to the zoning ordinance. I'm not even sure it's possible. I wasn't aware that that was part of the proposal, and I apologize for not being prepared. But I can't comment. I can look while the meeting progresses. If I'm able to get an answer in that time, I'll let you know.
Well, it could be something discussed at the July meeting
Thanks.
too. And when you be more prepared, because I'd like you listening now.
Sure.
and not looking things up. So, council, do you have more comments?
Could I just say, whoops, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, just
go
as a
ahead,
member,
whoever that was, yeah.
Oh, it's Stephanie?
Stephanie, as a
Stephanie?
member of the public, I would just say that I do think, I don't have a problem with the signs being put up for Mother's Day and Easter announcing the brunch. I do think that a lot of people were expecting to be able to use the rooftop when the hotel was built. I think that's already been hit on. And so I do think it is a nice opportunity for the community to be able to experience that. And like Greg said, those signs are just a reminder. So I don't have a problem with that part of it.
Thank you. Was there somebody else who was trying to speak at the same time and I missed them?
I was gonna
Oh, thank you.
comment if no one else had something. So maybe from, I don't know, maybe from some of the, I'd love to hear from some of the people who've spoken out against it. I kind of said this at the last meeting. In my understanding, and I wasn't here, this was a little before my time, but excuse me. In my understanding, you made some of the PUD restrictions to prevent, negative things, I would imagine. And what, I guess, I'd love to hear some of the reasons, like, I guess to be, I don't know how else to say it, but like, what I've heard is, well, this is, and I'm actually asking this question, this is what we decided at the time. And I'm having a hard time, like, figuring out, yeah, but why did you decide that? What was the things we're trying to prevent and the negative impact that those rules were created to prevent, right, on the community? And what was that? What were those designed to protect, right? Because as I'm sitting here now, just not, if I didn't know anything about any of that passed, I'm going, okay, the hotel wants to have more parking. They've got, I just want to hear from someone, either Pat or I don't know, anyone else who wants to comment on some of that.
Pat Bauer.
Yeah, as I explained in my memo, when both the original use and the rooftop restaurant went through, the zoning commission did a careful examination of both impact on traffic on Melrose Avenue and parking requirements. Neither of those assessments were made in 2020 when the only a rooftop restaurant was changed to be, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, but meetings or conference rooms. The owners of the hotel ran with that. You give them an inch, they took a foot, and now it's an event center, and there are proms and there are weddings and whatnot. So you shouldn't be surprised that the traffic and the parking is being exceeded, because their uses are far in excess of what presumably in 2020 were intended to be, well, kind of like a rooftop restaurant. And so when you use a use from 200 and you run it to 400 or 500, and then come back to the council and say, oh, please accommodate this 400 or 500, that's entirely at odds with what I think was understood in 2020, is it was going to be comparable uses. And so I think that that's what you're seeing here is, and I've suggested in my memo, I think that the existing PUD agreement doesn't authorize these event center things. And I've encouraged you to ask Steve, is that within the scope of the PUD agreement? And if not, or if so, can we change that? Because I think those uses are much greater than were anticipated at the time. The deal went through in 2017. The deal went through in 2018. Those changes were made in 2020. That's the essence of bait and switch.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll add to that a little bit, Bobby. You make a good point that if you weren't around at the time, then it may sound like, hey, this is the way things were done and we don't want to change. So So just a little bit of background, and I'll try to be very brief. Everyone's got time here. That property prior to being a hotel was a single family residence. It was heavily wooded and created a large green belt for all of the neighbors there on Olive Court and in that space, right? So one of the major concerns from everybody in the community was, how are we going to limit the visual impact of the hotel as well as the noise and maintain some green space around that area for the citizens of University Heights and for the homeowners in that area. So people that actually live here and own property here. So that was a very contentious part of this very extensive and long development agreement, PUD zoning. Many hours went into developing those agreements. And like Pat mentioned, there were concessions on both sides. One of those concessions was, let's add a restaurant to the top of the hotel so that it provides amenities for the University Heights citizens. That was one of the primary ideas behind having a restaurant there. It'd be like Stella, like Maggie's, someplace that people in the community could go to. No control of the hotel ownership, but the restaurateur backed out during COVID. You know, things happened, but that amenity part is gone. And that's why I think you're seeing the passion from a lot of the community against taking any little bit of the green space that was already supposed to be there and continuing to urban sprawl that into more parking lots. You know, the last thing we need is more parking lots around here and more traffic. And that goes completely and wholly against the development agreement that was, I mean, it's specific, it's very specific to prohibit this activity. All of the commentary from council members, citizens, even the developers themselves that stood there and said we weren't going to do this. So this is the pure definition of bait and switch. You wait till you get a new council, maybe a more favorable opportunity to change things. And as a city council, you guys are doing a tremendous amount of work really for the benefit of the city, right? And looking out for the citizens that live here. Even the developer can make no argument that says here's how this is going to benefit the city. It's all about how it's going to put more money in his pockets, right? So there's really nothing to consider here, you know, unless Greg wants to speak to why he's been, violating the development agreement already. And the real question would be, what are the remedies for that, right? It's a legally binding contract, so what's the remedy?
Thank you. Would anyone else want to make a comment?
Well, I would, if no members of the public. I'm appreciating the comments that are being made. So anyone that wants to speak, please do.
Yeah, it's Stephanie again. As I live on Olive Court, and so I have maybe felt the impact of the hotel being built more than others. I've lived in this house on Olive Court since 2009. So I have been here before the hotel, during the hotel, after. And I will say that I know some people mentioned that there has never been noise complaints. There's plenty of noise especially when the events are going on. You can hear the music, you can hear people yelling and screaming and partying. I mean, it sounds like, you know, how we get used to it with football season, lots of tailgating. And so when that's happening every weekend, or, you know, with the weddings and proms, I don't know if these are still going on, but there used to be Halloween parties held at the rooftop. And those were, so there is noise. And I think that is a drawback of living in the location that I live in now. The other thing, there are no stoplights between at the hotel entrance, at Olive Court entrance. And so there is already a backup of traffic. There's no turning lanes at those two intersections. And so especially if you are turning, if you are headed west from the hospital and needing to turn into either of those intersections, and then if you had a parking lot into that, there's going to be a significant increase in the backup of traffic trying to get in. And conversely, if you are trying to leave either this proposed parking lot, the hotel, Olive Court, and you are trying to, again, turn west or left. You know, currently, sometimes I have to sit at the intersection for 5 minutes. Typically, if I know, I go all the way around the block so I can get to the stoplight. That is not an option for where the hotel or where this parking lot is going to be put. And so I really do think that it's going to have a huge impact on traffic and congesting traffic, as well as pedestrian, because people are not stopping, you know, leaving their vehicle back out of the crosswalk for people to walk. They are creeping up to try and be able to pull out when there's an opportunity. And, you know, I think everyone's guilty of that, but it's also then impacting, I've seen pedestrian traffic get backed up as well. And so those are my concerns.
Thank you, Stephanie. Would anyone else like to speak?
Yeah, Louise.
Yeah, Mike,
Yes,
Richie?
when Mike Flom owned that property, that wooded area and stuff, you know, on football Saturdays, he parked over 300 cars back there. And you know, football parking is legal all through the community from midnight to midnight, but we're restricting a business that pays $33,000 a month in property taxes from bringing in some income. As far as the rooftop restaurant, you know, that was the design of the project to begin with. And then COVID came, and the people that were going to run the rooftop restaurant backed out on account of that. So, you know, the developers had to do something with that. And, you know, I'm sure that the developers would be more than willing with some sort of limit for privacy and stuff to show where they're at and what they're trying to do financially with this thing. You know, the hotel motel tax should show that, you know, on that thing. So I think that we just need to, you know, work with them as much as possible. I know a contract is a contract, but as a former union officer on the railroad, contracts change all the time.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak?
Are you just
Okay.
asking the public or are you asking?
I'm asking everyone because I want to make sure everyone gets to say what they want to say. It's important. And the plan is, as Pat Bauer suggested, that Mike Haverkamp is working to go into an in-person meeting, hopefully as early as July 11th, because this is an important subject. And as Pat says, you want to look people in the eye. And we are also dealing with other important subjects. And so that people would be interested in. And so Mike's going to do everything he can to facilitate an in-person meeting for July 11th. And that might be more helpful too, to everyone. I just wanted to say that.
Mhm.
And would the council like to, how would you want to proceed with this? Are we going to continue to talk about it in July? How do you want to, what would you suggest how to proceed with this?
I think I'm at the place. I mean, I've heard, I've been having multiple conversations with many people, and really, Pat, you did a great job on your memorandum. I thought that was very well put together. And listening to people, I feel like, I think we're at the place where we need to just take a vote basically on the council members and decide on some of the things at the next meeting. And so really, I don't know what that means. So it sounds like, I mean, this is just me, so feel free to disagree, rest of you council, obviously, but the one about the adding additional parking spots, that one has to go through a notice, right?
Yeah, an ordinance change.
An ordinance change, and that, okay, and then the others are ones we can vote on, and so we can have you Steve Ballard prepare a resolution, I guess, regarding those.
That's right. And yeah, so if you wanted to vote on increasing the number of parking spaces, you could vote on that in July to set a public hearing in August. If you're not ready to do that or don't want to do that, you don't have to. But just when you talked about taking a vote, I wanted to point that out. You can't do it in July, and you know that, and you said that, but you could vote to hold a public hearing. With regard to the other matters, use of the parking lot, daily parking, game day parking, and then signage, those are development agreement changes that you could vote on. And I think I guess the direction, if the council wants me to put something together along those lines, well, the council can, I can put it together. I can put it together.
Yeah.
I can put it together to have all three of those things included, or we could do separate things, or they could be all together and the council could, vote to amend, what I draft when it adopts things. And what I mean is if the resolution said, we'd like to amend the development agreement to permit game day parking, to permit daily parking, and to permit temporary signage, somebody could move to amend or to adopt that resolution, and someone could move to amend it to say, I want to take out the daily park. So
Okay.
I hope I'm being clear about that.
So,
But my point is, if you want to say, hey, give us three different proposals for those things, then that's what I'll do.
okay. I don't, well, what does the rest of the council think? I don't know if whatever's easiest and simplest, I guess. I mean, just for the public that's here and from just, we have, a few weeks or a couple weeks between now and when we have to vote on this. Just where I'm at personally, like I'm listening to where people are at. I'm hearing the concerns. I don't know that I see a huge issue with what they're wanting to do. I mean, as I think about that part of the town, it's on the east side of University Heights. It's near similar use facilities or zoning, with Kinnick and that type of thing. As far as football parking goes, I don't know that I have any problem with it. I mean, we do it everywhere else in the city. I'm just trying to see what are the issues and problems that it's going to create for our residents. And I don't know that I see any. I think the hotel does a phenomenal job of, taking care of the property, keeping it well kept. I mean, obviously they've done a lot of things for the community. Hotel motel tax revenue is a huge one. I mean, I think frankly, we'd be in a really tight spot had it not been for that investment that they made. And so yeah, I mean, I don't, we're not, just because of that, I don't think we're not at their mercy. We can do whatever we want, but I also think if it's something that helps them financially, I don't care as long as it doesn't, as long as it's not creating issues for the community that are, yeah, just problematic. As long as it's not a nuisance property, right? That's where I'm at. And so, I mean, I'm anxious, looking forward to talking to people in the next couple of weeks about it, because I really would love to hear about it. I'm not, taking my feet in or anything, but I'd love to hear from people. And then the other thing is too, I think we all would have loved a restaurant on the top, but that wasn't just what panned out. COVID happened and it's weird. And I think, we can certainly use the event center. I think it benefits our community. I mean, maybe my daughter will have a wedding reception there someday. And also, as far as the restaurant goes, I think we can use the bistro, that's a benefit too. And I've gone there multiple times and that's been great. And all I have to say that I'm just leaning in towards giving them what they're asking for, with the exception that I don't want it to become a nuisance. And I don't want there to be any traffic problems. I don't want that to create any congestions. I wouldn't want to give I wouldn't want to agree to something where a year from now, 5 years from now, we're regretting it. And the other thing is, I think there's a lot of changes happening at the hospital. And I think in 5 years, that whole Melrose area, that whole Melrose traffic, I think it's gonna be way different. I mean, I know that they've got multi-million-dollar projects going on and planned, and I think that whole thing is gonna be different than what it is now. And I'm not interested in the hotel creeping, the scope creep, I'll call it. I'm not interested in that becoming any bigger than it is, frankly. But I don't think allowing them more parking spots now is really going to change much of what's already there. And so that's where I'm at. But I don't know, like I said, I'd be happy to talk to anyone else about that. And in the meantime, and then, yeah, I mean, so Steve Ballard, from my perspective, I'd love it if you would create something along those lines and give it to us at the July meeting, but.
So from my perspective, Bobby, you even said, I don't want to do something I'm going to regret. Well, I did something in 2018 that I'm regretting right now. We don't have a rooftop restaurant. We approved in 2020 something I also regret. We approved a meeting conference center. Now they're calling it an event center. It has huge crowds of people. You heard from members of the public that say there is noise, there is traffic. They're coming and asking for, Greg said what? 250 to 300 parking spaces? That's outrageous. So I regret that. I don't see how we listen to this informed public input and say, well, I don't see any problems. I see a lot of problems here. There's ill will in the community now towards the hotel, Greg. I don't want to say a deal's a deal, but you did come to us and make these promises. Football parking, Bobby, was a huge deal to people. Why? I think you look at that green space, that'll give you one good reason why. There's no trees on it. There's no landscaping on it because Greg, in violation of the PUD agreement, has been having tailgating activities there. So I think that's a big drawback to football parking. I think there's crowds of people. I think there are other things going on. I've heard that the hotel has had so many people in it that maybe the fire marshal needed to pay a visit. There are all kinds of things that could be a drawback here. It's not, and I thought we were trying to do things in our community to clear out the crazy congestion in parts of town. This isn't going to do it. And looking across the street at a property that's been here forever, has no agreement attached to it. Someday that will be redeveloped and hopefully we'll have a council that will come up with an agreement like the one in 2016, 2017 worked so hard to come up with, listening to public input. I agree with Pat Bauer and with Michael Crocker. You don't just throw that out the window because we have a new council. I think it's bad faith to our own community. And if you're listening to people and reading things online, I think members of our community think that also. So I'm at the opposite end of the spectrum. I don't see why we would even proceed with this other than I thought Pat Bauer had an excellent suggestion about the sign. Instead of those banners, fix the permanent sign that's there. I thought that was a good suggestion. So I guess the bottom line is, Steve put this in his legal report last month. This needs to be in the community's best interest. I don't see how this is in the community's best interest. I agree. It's, Michael Crocker said this could be an easy thing to just say no.
Would anyone else like to speak as far as?
I would like to speak.
Oh, Tim, thank you,
There's-
Tim.
Hey, parking in the green space is a big no. 250 to 300 spaces, that's a big no. I've reached out to, we work with parking consultants, and work with parking. One of them that we work with is Rich and Associates out of Detroit. I reached out to them to ask them how many spaces should be on the site based on the uses, including the event space, and they said maybe 226 at the most. And so from what I'm hearing, the big question is whether you accept that use of an event space on the roof, you know, as being viable. If you do accept it as being viable, you should help the hotel figure out a way to make it viable with the parking to support it. Now, there's other ways to get, and I sent Greg a sketch today of a way to get the 14 spaces that he was proposing in the green space back on the south side of the lot today as just one alternative to not build in that green space, but to make up for a bit of that parking shortfall. But if that function of, you know, having the event space on the roof in lieu of a restaurant is not acceptable in the first place, then I think you got to go back, circle back a little further than, you know, where we are right now. Personally, I feel like once they have a set number of parking spaces, they can manage it how they want, but I think there's other concerns here that I wasn't aware of back when these agreements were made. So I don't have a strong opinion about that at all. And a sign on Mother's Day and the other brunch, that's not a big deal to me either, but that's where I'm sitting right now.
So we say Mother's Day and maybe, I don't know, Valentine's Day, whatever. There was a sign sitting in the right of way for several weeks that they just took down that was advertising the bistro. So what I have observed, and I hate to have to be the one to say this, but you tell them they can do something at the hotel and then you look and they're doing all kinds of stuff that you didn't know was going on. So I'm not having the confidence that it's going to be a couple of banners here. And like I said, I think Pat Bauer's idea is a good idea and we just avoid that conflict at all. I think another thing is that I think we've seen an aerial photo where their parking configuration on some of these events, including game day, is not what is laid out in the agreement. And I'm even wondering if emergency vehicles would be able to get through there. I have no knowledge of that on those days. So they're parking, instead of parallel to the curb, they're parking nose in on some of those days.
Would anyone else on council like to make a comment?
Boy, I bet you wish you knew COVID was coming. You probably wouldn't have built that 6th floor. Yeah, you're a victim of circumstance. I understand that, and I really feel for you, and I understand all the concerns. Pat brought up great points, and we're pretty close in a lot of areas, not quite all, but pretty darn close. I'm definitely not for paving that top lot, but I see absolutely no reason to discriminate against anybody, business or not, to have game day parking there. I mean, the entire city's swarmed with every square inch with a car on it. I really don't think anybody's coming to admire our grass in front of the hotel. So I think that's got a moot point. The signage, you know, the temporary signage, I guess I don't have a problem with that either. It's not like cardboard and spray paint out there where that looks really bad. I mean, they are done tastefully and done professionally, and I don't have an issue with it. I mean, you got bumps just down the road there. It's got 30 of them lined up in a row, and hear anybody being upset about that. So granted, that's out of our jurisdiction. I understand that, but I really feel sad that we sound like we're anti-hotel here and we're really villainizing the hotel when I really feel like we should be partnering with them and help them come up with better solutions instead of kind of going after them. I think I'd like to see everybody take some of that energy and turn this into something, because this is a great revenue provider for our city that keeps our police force here, and we're able to give them raises and keep good police officers here without them moving off and moving on. So I'd like to see that income stream stay healthy as much as we can, but at the same time, I agree, I'm not just caving into everything the hotel wants. I certainly don't want that either. So it's a slippery slope, and it's awful hard to ride two donkeys with one ass. I really understand that. So I guess I'd like to see things maybe dissect a little bit more and kind of go piece by piece and put that in the July thing. But that's all I've got.
Thank you, Doug.
That's kind of my thoughts as well, Louise, is I sure think that the hotel has done some fabulous things for this community. I don't want to become enemies of our most lucrative entity or citizen. I think that there's enough of us that are willing to at least listen to this in July that we could maybe move forward with, for sure, having Steve put something in the agenda, come up with some kind of wording or whatever that we could vote on. I mean, I don't think we're all going to agree on this. It's just the way it is, but to at least move things forward and not come to a standstill. I'd also like to see the other community members come to the city council meeting in July and speak if they want to. I think we're at a standstill, and we're going to have to vote on it and move it forward, or it's just going to be dragged out more.
Okay. Does any of the council want to speak? Okay, Lisa.
I do. I mean, I think this is a huge issue for the city. And to say that we're just going to draw something up and vote on it next week, no, I don't agree with that. This is too big of an issue for the city. It's a divisive issue. If you want to move forward with this, then I think it should go to the zoning commission to have the zoning commission look at this. I don't think this is something we just hop on and vote on and then live with the consequences. We're already living with consequences. I do like the hotel. I have supported the hotel. This is just a step too far. And if you haven't paid attention or noticed or been part of it, every time we do something, then you turn around and look and, oh, well, it's not turned out the way we thought. That's not, we keep calling it an event center. They turned it into an event center when what we approved in that ordinance 249 was meetings, conferences. Steve, can we get a legal opinion, maybe if we're going to talk about this at the next meeting on that? I mean, I think Pat Bauer laid that out pretty good, but I think there's some other questions too. This isn't just, yeah, let's vote on it and go. I mean, Greg talks about his financial necessity. Somebody suggested getting an actual report on that. Let's take a look at that. What about, I remember talk back in 2017, and I'm certainly no expert on this, the Marriott flag. And we had a council member that kept bringing up, what if they lose the Marriott flag? Well, do we know that the Marriott approves all of these things, that this isn't going to cause a problem for them? And And I don't want an assurance from Greg. I mean, I think that should come from the Marriott. Is that a reasonable request? I think that we don't just jump on this and try to get this done, because it certainly looks like and sounds like we're trying to get this done before football season. This isn't about Go Hawks. This is about our city and our residents and our community. There were reasons that people objected to things that got put in the PUD agreement. I think you should at least respect that and respect all of the work that went into this agreement that was done in the 2016-2017 council. I was not part of that. I was at a lot of those meetings, so. And they did involve the zoning commission. They didn't just say, oh, we're just gonna, you know, yeah, they want to have a hotel, okay, let's vote on it. You know, they researched a lot of issues, and I think we should do the same thing. And I'm saying that because in 2020, we didn't. And now we don't have a meeting conference center. We have 400 people, and you heard Stephanie Walk say they're being disturbed. I don't want to say, oh, let's just go ahead and disturb all the neighbors on Olive Court. And when they all move away, then maybe we can, you know, do something there. We were trying to stabilize that neighborhood. That's why we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with that street reconstruction. That's why we have 2 deed restricted houses there. And those people, I'm sure, are, Jonathan Wilson is telling you, they're not happy. So this needs a lot of consideration. And Greg, I have supported the hotel, and you know that. So I hate having to be the one that says all this.
Right.
I don't like being the pariah, but somebody has to bring up some issues here.
Can I say something, Louise?
Yes, Greg.
I want to move back to Tim's comment. He said 226. I'd be happy with that. That's only, by the way, that I'm not asking for 250 or 300 spots. I'm asking an additional 50 to 100 spots. We already have 196 spots. All I was saying, I don't want it. I don't know if I misspoke before, but it's not an additional 250 or 300. It's an additional 50 to 100. So 226 is 20, 30 more than I have now, which, I'd be happy with that. And again, I want to say if the city council allows me to have football parking, then I'm going to be over the 196. So I can't legally park. I can't legally have football parking if I'm over the 196. Steve pointed that out to me. If I have football parking, I have to have more spots, because football parking, is more than 196. Because anyway, so again, I'm not wanting 250 or 300 spots. It's not. That sounds different than what's in my head. I just want an extra 50 to 100. But again, I looked at Bella Sala. They have 125 spots, and their space is the same size as mine. So I would not need 250 or 300 spots for that location. Bella Sala gets along great with their location, and we're managing with the parking we have. Yes, can we use more? Yes, but I will not be able to do football parking if I don't have more spots. That's the bigger ticket, or more spots would help my events. We have a lot of complaints from our events that we don't have enough parking. So anyway, that's all.
Did everyone on council get to speak what they wanted to say?
We did. I don't know do we need to decide on, Luis, on what's next, or what we're asking Steve to do?
Right. I that's what I was going to summarize. It's been an hour and a half, and I think we can summarize, and you can too. I was think we have a majority that wants to move this forward, that just because you're having more public input and a vote, maybe not a vote, council can decide in July if they want to go ahead and do that or not. It's just, it's up to the council, and they'll hear more public input then and decide if they want to do that, if they want to defer it, if they want to, you know, whatever. It doesn't mean there's going to absolutely be a vote in July, but there is opportunity to have a vote in July. Is that right, Steve? Is that what that means?
Yeah, to have an action item, to take a vote, you definitely need to have it on your agenda. And so, you know, having it on the agenda permits you to have a vote. It doesn't require you to take a vote.
Okay, thank you. So I hear that 3 people want to move forward to put something, have you pull something together. And so why don't you summarize what you're going to do, Steve, so everybody is on the same page.
So can I ask a question first?
Sure, of course.
Please. Does nobody think this should go to the zoning commission to look at? Am I the only one suggesting that? I mean, I know we can talk about it in July, but here we are saying, oh, Steve can put it on there so we can maybe possibly vote. Nobody thinks we ought to ask the zoning commission to weigh in on this issue. I mean, this is a pretty important issue.
I'll speak, Louise.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you.
Actually, you know, I'm torn because I was on zoning commission before I was on city council. So I know what goes on in those meetings. I know that zoning commission actually has a lot on their plate right now. And I think that this is something that we could figure out among our city council members. I don't think that it needs to go to zoning commission. I think that at this time, it's something that they wouldn't be able to help us with any more than we could do ourselves.
So Mary Panther, I don't want to put you on the spot, so you don't have to respond, but you're on the zoning commission.
No, I was just going to respond. I'm on zoning, and I think we'd be happy to look at it. I sure would be.
Yeah,
I think
and I
we
think
could-
it
I
gets
think
it
we could.
before more people. You'd have more opportunity for more public input. This is what we said we wanted. You get more opportunity for more public input.
Yeah.
And more people are looking at it, and you're getting more opinions. I think that's the way that I would like to go.
I think we could make time. Pete, the head of the zoning, is very organized, very good at directing our meetings. So I think we'd be fine to look at it. And I think we should.
I would also respond to that if I may. This is Pat Yeagy.
Hi, Pat.
Yes, I guess it doesn't matter to me whether if the council wants to decide themselves or send it to zoning. But really, I mean, we're meeting once a month. We could certainly, we're not that busy that we couldn't handle something else. That's not a reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else on council want to comment? Stephanie made a comment. Bobby?
I hear what you're saying, Lisa, and I don't know, Tim, what you think, but I think with our council and our zoning, I think at the end of the day, it's a body of people making a decision, and it's one that I'm at this point comfortable making, and I feel like I've done it. I really do want to keep an open ear to people. I feel like I kind of know where I'm at with this, and I don't feel the need to take it to zoning. I don't know, Tim, if you need to chime in.
Feel like at the root cause of this, if you look at it, it's whether or not you're going to acknowledge that rooftop venue as a business entity, and then whether people are willing to add that, and if because of the events of COVID and whatnot, as things have evolved and comes down to that, and once you make that decision, the other decisions will fall into place. But I think you can make hard boundaries, like no parking in that green space and some of those things. But I think you got to make that decision first and foremost.
Are you suggesting, Tim, that we would go back on what we've approved, or what are you saying with that?
What was approved didn't include the rooftop venue, so it's operating as a rooftop venue. Are we going to tell them they can't operate a rooftop venue and just shut the thing down? Or are we going to let them have that space operated as they have been? If they are operating it that way, that to me changes the parking makeup to a little bit of a degree, not to a significant degree, where you might allow them to figure out a way to add a few more spaces, but not on the green space again.
Right.
But and then the whole discussion of whether it's tailgate parking or whatnot, that's beyond me right now. But it's that rooftop venue that the operations of the hotel have changed since the agreement. So are you going to recognize that, or are we not going to recognize that?
So, Tim, kind of not following you there. I mean, we approved meetings, conferences, and as has been described, I think, by several people, that I think under the assumption that they would operate within the limitations of the parking that they had.
Yeah.
Okay. In that meeting where we approved that, one of those meetings in October 2020, Greg Steltner said, we're going to continue in the near future or future to look at having that be a restaurant. That's why there was no, I guess that's why there was no consideration of additional parking. We assumed that they would operate with meetings, conferences within the parking. So are you saying we go back to that? Because we have not approved these giant things, and I'm going to keep saying this, that we have a member of the public here that is described being disturbed by those large events. When the council in 2017 went to great lengths, the zoning commission also, as a matter of fact, went to great lengths to make sure that neighbors were being thought about, considered, and protected from these kinds of negative effects. So I'm just kind of throwing all this stuff out here. I think the zoning commission made a great contribution back in 2017. I'm not sure why we're afraid of the zoning commission now. I think it would be a good way to get more input. You know, some of you are on the fence. Maybe we could get some really good, reasonable input instead of, as Pat Bauer said, it's just a new cast of characters deciding for yourself. Some of the zoning commissioners were here for that. So I guess I'm just going to not make this easy on anybody. You know, I think
I have a question. You know, Tim said that he talked to the people in another business or another state, or, you know, worked on these kinds of projects. And Tim said that, you know, 226 is the most that I would need. That's only 30 more spots than I have now. We can easily create 30 more spots. Tim showed me how to create 14 today. He said that too. To me, there's easy ways to create more parking in my current parking lot. And I think that that's something we can work through. You know,
it sounds like getting a parking lot up front on that yard that ship has sailed. That's not really an option. It seems like, Greg, is that correct, what you're saying too? Right?
I said that earlier. I backed off
Okay.
of that. I just want to be in compliant with the football parking. If, again, I keep saying this, you know, if I go to football parking, I'm over the 196, and even if I went to 226 would be fine. Again, but I would like as many as I can get, so I don't have to, you know, if I do find ways of creating more parking, like Tim showed, and I think the, you know, perpendicular parking on the west side is, you know, an option if we can move the wall back 8 or 9 feet. I think that's an option as well to create more parking for my events. The space is big enough, the parking acreage is big enough for more parking. We just got to be creative and finding it, and it's more like, okay, let's not help him do this. Let's find ways of not helping him do this. It's so hard for me to hear all this because all I'm doing is trying to, you know, run a business. It's frustrating to hear because I am a giving person. Anyway, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I feel like I think we can work through the parking. And
then the main question that I have is, which I think is the one we're all concerned about, is, okay, if we give you those extra spots, what is the negative impact that it has? And to me, that's where I don't know that I don't know that I've heard, or I don't know that I've heard a huge explanation for what are the negative impacts of giving you those spots, right? And maybe the congestion thing, the traffic thing, maybe, but even then I'm not 100% convinced, I guess. And so I guess just where I'm at, I mean, I don't know that anyone's mind's going to be changed by the end of this meeting, to be frank. I mean, I'm great giving Steve Ballard direction and coming back with I would like to see whatever a separate resolution, if you will, Steve, for each one. And then we can vote individually on each one of those things, I guess. And then regarding the number of parking spots or whatever, if that's the zoning one, we push that to the August meeting.
So that I'm clear with what you're asking me, Bobby, push anything having to do with the zoning to the August meeting. So like even voting to have a public hearing would be. Like
no, I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We would have the public hearing so we could, I guess I don't know. I'm not sure on the technical process and procedure for anything involving zoning, but just come with it. For that, the process is we need to have a public hearing and then we need to vote on it the next time.
Right. So you could vote in July to hold the public hearing in August.
That's accurate. Correct. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
On August. Yep.
I'm hearing 3 council want to move that way. So you set that up, Steve, and we'll have another meeting in person, hopefully. If Mike's going to work that out, hopefully, we'll do the best we can to have a live meeting at this community center, city council chambers on 7 o'clock, July 11th. Okay, I'm going to move on to city treasurer. John Brown, our city treasurer's here, or he was here. And we have some warrants that have been listed and sent to the council that need to be paid today. Are there any additions or correction? Oh, I see John there right now. John, hi. John's our new city treasurer.
Hello, Mayor. Sorry, my mouse fell asleep. I had to wake it up. So.
And welcome, everyone. Yeah, welcome, John. Lori Camara, after nearly 20 years, retired from the position. And John Brown, who lives in University Heights, has a CPA background. He has a background in accounting. I'm not sure you're CPA, but you have a background in.
I'm not a CPA. I've had senior accounting positions with 2 Fortune 500 companies. I'm an enrolled agent with the IRS. I have an MBA, but I'm not a CPA. So.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you for clarifying that. And so, John, you submitted warrants to the council and they were listed. And are there any additions to those? Does anyone have any additions to what's listed? Okay, is there any objections to paying the warrants that are listed? Hearing none, the warrants will be paid by unanimous consent. Thank you, John. And any announcements? Okay. I don't remember any announcements myself. Is there any objection to adjournment? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned by unanimous consent. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight and speaking. We really appreciate it and hope you'll be back next month and hopefully in the council chambers. Have a good evening. Thank you.